Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Lorna, and I'm an alcoholic. Hello. And first of all, I'd like to thank the committee so much for inviting me to speak here. I know you have a choice of many speakers, and it's always a great privilege to be asked. And thank you for the lovely basket and the envelope and all the wonderful things that you've done, the beautiful corsage that you've done to make me feel so welcome. As Alfie said, it is a challenging time in my life. I have this thing on my head because I'm in the middle of chemo and I'm bald. And being bald is more difficult for me. I had a double mastectomy this summer, and being bald seems to have been more difficult than that. That's vanity for you. And but I take great inspiration from the men I see that are bald, and mine will grow back. So I'm told. I was sent. I sent actually a picture of myself. Oh, I must keep an eye on the time because I really must for the taper. Sent a picture of myself bald to a girlfriend of mine, and she wrote back and she said, well, now you and the Dalai Lama have something else in common. So that was very... Now, I'm sure some of you are already sort of scratching your heads and saying, well, that doesn't sound like a New York accent. No, it's sort of a Texas accent. No, it's not. Anyway, this is the first time I've spoken on this level and been spoken since I was diagnosed in July of this year. And there's a lot I'd like to say. So I've spoken on a group level, but never like this. So I feel a great privilege to be able to share. You know, when I first used to speak, I used to think and I used to say, well, I hope there's something I can say that's helpful to you. I hope you get something out of what I have to say. And of course, I'm not here to help you at all. It would be very arrogant to think that I could. I'm here because obviously God thinks I need an awful lot of help. And I get to speak and to have myself reflected and to hear myself and to have those words, come out of me. And they say we keep it by giving it away. I don't think we even know we've got it until we've given it away. So I guess to do the very classic thing and just whip through my story so that I can talk about what's happening to me and the revelations that's going on in my life in this last half a year. I would say that my drinking story could really be categorized by just missing out. I always just missed it. I sort of went into mini skirts the year Max's came out. I mean, I just was wrong. I was always, alcoholics are always whining and saying, oh, I never felt like I fit in. And, well, we don't. And we're always some sort of jagged scream in society, and we're always sort of not quite right. And just a couple of stories to emphasize this. I was raised in England and in the London area, and on Sunday nights in the local town called Richmond, there was this rock and roll band that used to play, and we liked to go there and dance on a Sunday night in the Station Hotel. And the leader of this band sort of took a fancy to me. He thought I was a bit of all right, and really kind of liked me. I was 18 years old at the time, 17, 18, and I wasn't that keen on him. I had my sights set on America, and I wanted to come here. I didn't want to fiddle around with all that sort of nonsense. And the band's name was the Rolling Stones, and you know, I might not have liked him, but it would have been wonderful to have on my resume. Don't you agree? The last year of my drinking was the summer of 1976, and it was the year of America. I was in America. I was living in America by now, and it was America's bicentennial. And I desperately wanted to see those tall ships going up the Hudson River. There was a huge celebration and all that, and I wanted to be in New York to see the tall ships. Now, I had this very highfalutin job. I'm the first woman art auctioneer in America. I was with Sotheby's in New York, and I was in London in July of '76. I was there. My company was having some big fancy do at some fancy hotel, and Lord and Lady Doo-Wah-Diddy were there, and you know, owners of great collections and museum directors, and it was a very important evening. And I was there all done up like a dog's dinner in this beautiful gown and all that. But, you know, I hadn't bothered to wash my hair. It was such a sort of an alcoholic woman's thing. I just couldn't be bothered to wash my hair. And so I had it all pulled back in a bun. And while they were dancing, I was going from table to table, emptying their glass into mine. And I knew, something struck me, I knew that my behavior didn't quite go with my outfit or with my position in the company. But I just couldn't quite figure out what was the matter. And I just said, oh, what the hell, you know, they wouldn't understand, and it's me after all, and it's just me. And anyway, that was that evening, and at the time, my marriage had broken up. I was desperate to get the poor fellow back, and very unhappy about the marriage breaking up, but I was going out with this other chap that I wanted to marry, and I'd gone off to Paris to see him. I mean, it sounds very glamorous, but believe me, it wasn't. It was really seedy. I mean, you know, we're never going out with the cream of the crop at the end of our drinking, let's face it. And, or for the first 5 years in sobriety, usually, but, anyway, I'd come back from Paris, and I was in my parents' house, and I was just so upset and so involved with myself and my mucky life and how my life wasn't going right. And I wanted to get back to New York to see these tall ships and to be involved in the festivities in America around the bicentennial. And I have this distinct memory of my father standing at the garden gate waving goodbye to me as I went off to Heathrow Airport. And I was like, yeah, bye. I couldn't be bothered with him. And it was the last time I was to see my father. I was so wrapped up in self. And it... you know, we are told that we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. But I regret that. And I think some regrets are good. I think it's good that I regret it. And all these 31 years later, I regret that I didn't have the time to talk to my father, to say goodbye, to concentrate, to be there. But that regret spurs me to not meet or part from people in a casual manner, not to be talking on a cell phone while someone's trying to talk to me, to really try and be with who is with me at that moment. I never know, if that person's going to be the last person I see on earth. So it does, that memory and that regret of my father does inform my present. And while I regret it, I'm happy to have it. Anyway, I came back to New York, as I said, to see those tall ships. And I live on Manhattan Island, and an island means that one is surrounded with water. And if I'd gone out to my apartment and walked left or right, and walked in the same direction, I would have hit a river eventually. But I just didn't know how to get to the water. I just didn't know. It was all too much for me, just too much. And I spent that entire time alone. I was 30 years old. And it was only in the last 8 or 10 years that I've really gotten in touch with the depth of my isolation, the depths of the isolation of the alcoholic. And it's nothing to do with loneliness. It's that chosen isolation. What is in me that's always programmed to isolate? And the whole of America was celebrating, and I missed it. The whole of America was celebrating, and I chose to be by myself. Now, at 30 years old, I had this big job. I was surrounded with people. Why didn't I have people to call and say, let's go and see the tall ships together? Don't know. It's an interesting reflection. Anyway, the end of my drinking was very tied up with that fellow from Paris. He was an American, but he was just living in was summering in Paris that time, and I'd gone to see him, and he came back. But I often like to tell this story. I was going out with this fellow, and I wanted to marry him. And the fact that he hadn't mentioned it or even posed the question at all didn't seem to deter me at all. And the reason I wanted to marry him was that he had the one thing in the world I wanted. And it wasn't a great love of me. It wasn't fine manners or a noble character or anything like that. He had a maid. And I was desperate for the maid. I wanted someone to lay my clothes out, brush my hair, run my bath, tell me it's time to wake up, get me dressed, undress me. Life was becoming, just too much. And I was a very heavy smoker in those days, and every chair you sat in his apartment, there was a little silver container of loose cigarettes beside the chair, an ashtray, and a lighter that worked. And I was always looking for one or all three of those things. And I always say, I was willing to let this fellow touch the sacred temple in order to get to the maid. And in some circles, that's called prostitution. So, but what do we care? I didn't care about any sort of intimacy with anyone, coffee, bagels, and intercourse. I mean, it was all sort of, the same. There was nothing sort of special or sacred or divine in life at all. It was just this sort of alcoholic blur. And this particular day, I got up on a Sunday morning and I was having brunch with this fellow, and I got up and I fixed myself a carafe of vodka and orange juice. And I poured myself a tumbler full. And I took this drink, and something hit me. I said to myself, I am drinking in the morning. This is a morning drink. Now, I've had a drink in the morning many, many times, but there's an ancient Chinese saying. I always say, have you ever heard of a modern Chinese saying? They're all ancient, but anyway, that says the beginning of wisdom is to call something by its correct name. Now, I'd had a drink in the morning many times, but I'd called it brunch, I'd called it Toasting the Bride, I'd called it a gallery opening, I'd called it Summertime, Wednesday, something. But I mean, I'd never called it a drink in the morning. I'd lived in Spain for a very short while. I had cognac in my coffee every morning, and I called it being continental. But this particular morning, some kind of clarity came through, and I said, this is a morning drink. And then the disease came running, and the disease whispered in my ear and said, oh, Lorna, you know, the sort of woman you are, the kind of job you have to hold down, why do you make life so difficult for yourself? Why don't you do this every morning? It would make life so much simpler. You don't want to be drunk, you just want to go to work with just a little lining of courage in your stomach, just to sort of get you over the hump of 11 a.m. or something. And with that thought, I think God looked out from heaven and went, oy vey, this one, you know, she really needs some help quickly. And I got in the shower, and I could not release the glass from my hand. I could not put it down. And I was showering, trying to keep this thing out of the spray. And I really remember this morning very clearly, because I connected it with cigarettes. Once I lit a cigarette, I was not the sort that could put it in the ashtray and chat and then pick it up and take another puff and chat. I had a cigarette holder, so I could keep it in my mouth the entire time. You know, I never put the cigarette down once it was lit. And I identified it with that. And anyway, I weaved off to have brunch with this fellow. I drank some more, and I ended up on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And I don't know if any of you know it. It sort of looks like that scene from Rocky. There's a lot of steps going up to the front entrance. And on a summer's afternoon, there's a lot of tourists around, and people are there going in and out of the museum. And it was very hot. I was feeling just dreadful. I was drunk. It was hot. I'd had this awful brunch with this fellow. The relationship was a disaster and mucky and shabby and icky. And I had long hair, which drove me absolutely nuts, this hair. And I always wanted a hairstyle forever. So I wore it in braids across the top of my head. And, you know, I fancied I looked like Heidi, but I didn't. It was so tight, it pulled my eyes back and gave me a headache, but I could keep it up for 2 and 3 days at a time, you know. And I was sitting there feeling just dreadful, and I didn't know whether to go into the museum, whether to not go into the museum, whether to go to the movies. The sun wasn't going to set for a long time. It was summertime. It was a long time since I'd been invited anywhere. I was 30 years old. Why was I so alone? I don't know. And I stood up and I thought to myself, you know something? I'm going to go to one of those meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And to just backtrack a bit, I'd been in a sauna once with a girlfriend of mine, very upset that my marriage had broken up. And she said to me, you know, Lorna, last night I went to this meeting called Al-Anon, and all the women sounded just like you. And as soon as she started talking about alcohol, something clicked to me that, oh, my husband drank. And so that's probably why he left. So the very next night, I went to one of these meetings of Al-Anon, and it was suggested that one go to open AA meetings. So, not being one to muck about or waste any time, the very next night, this is in May, I think, of '76, the very next night I was to do something I repeated for quite a while. After work, I went across, Sotheby's in those days was at 76th Street and Madison Avenue, and after work, I went across the road to the Carlisle Hotel, and there was a place in there called Bemelman's Bar. And I like to go into Bemmelman's bar after work with my fellow workers, and I love to drink on an empty stomach. You know, I love to not eat all day and have that first vodka and orange juice, and whoomph! I didn't want to have the peanuts or the pretzels, I just wanted that alcohol in my system. So this particular night, it was a Thursday night, I had been to the Al-Anon meeting on Wednesday. I said to my friends, "Ooh, it's almost 7:30. I'm going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll be back." And so I toddled up the road to this meeting, and I had checked it out beforehand. It was a sort of meeting that people like myself who were not alcoholics could attend. And I sat there, and it was a 3-speaker meeting. And this fellow got up on the stage, the first fellow got up on the stage, and as I am now, and in front of him there was a board here, and it said, "But for the grace of God." So I suppose that us as the group were supposed to look at this poor wretch standing up here and realize that but for the grace of God you could be him. And anyway, he started and he said, "My name's Dawn and I'm an alcoholic." And I remember thinking to myself, oh, good God, we don't all want to know. And surely there's some things you keep to yourself. I mean, really, God. And, you know, while I was absolutely, I'm British after all, while I was absolutely horrified that he was being so revealing about himself, I was also fascinated, absolutely fascinated and intrigued. I didn't understand that this was called identification. But I would like to segue here and think that that is what qualifies me as an alcoholic. I really do. I think if one likes to come to these meetings and listen to how people, you know, ruin their lives and were crawling on the bathroom floor and vomiting on clients and lost their whole families and woke up with strange people in strange places, and you find it fascinating, there's something the matter with you. You know, and not only do I find it interesting, I like to go to coffee shops afterwards and talk about it some more. I like to get on the phone and talk about it. It's endlessly interesting to me, endlessly. And still 31 years later, I've been on a diet of a meeting a day my entire sobriety. And I find it endlessly fascinating. I think that, you know, there's a problem. So, and after dawn, there were 2 other chaps got up and told equally as interesting stories. And after the meeting was over, I toddled off back to Bemmelman's bar. And what did I understand about anonymity? I didn't know the sacredness of anonymity. I thought it was a jolly good job that you were anonymous, so you should be for what you've gotten up to. But so I told them, you know, exactly who was there, and I said, you'd never guess who is an alcoholic, and revealed all sorts of details of their stories. And so that was, but I kept going. I kept going on Thursday nights to these meetings, and I looked up other meetings that I could go to. So by the time I had this meltdown on the steps of the Metropolitan, AA was in me. And I got up from those steps, and I thought, I'll go to one of those meetings. And I walked into a meeting at 31st Street and Lexington Avenue. It was at the Moravian Church in New York. And it was a real, you know, the typical sort of how many of us imagine AA is going to be. It really was one of those meetings. It was sort of a Salvation Army type place. And there was a woman speaking. And she told my story, and she was sort of like me in looks. She had my build and big-boned like I am and that, but she was very blousy, and she looked used, and she had broken capillaries on her face. And she told my story up to where I was at that very moment. And then she went on for another 15 years. And suddenly, it was like time concertinaed. I knew that she was me and I was her, and it was just a matter of moment by moment by moment that I would be her. And it was a real gift and a moment of grace, because when you're 20, you can't imagine being 45. I mean, 45 is like, ancient, let alone being 60. I mean, really, that's much, much too old. And you're never going to be 60. It's just too in advance, too way out there. And I think it's a gift given to youth that you just can't see that. And but this particular gift was given to me that I knew there was no difference, that 15 years between she and myself was just going to go like that, like that, like that, like that. It was just momentary if I stayed alive. And it suddenly came to me, oh my God, I drink. It's drinking. It's not the husband, the lover, the job, the country, or my friends, or lack of friends, or anything else. I drink. And that thought was so upsetting to me and so mind-blowing to me. I ran out of that meeting, ran across the street into a bar and Lexington Avenue, and knocked back another alcohol, vodka and orange juice. And that night I went out in Lower Manhattan drinking, and I don't know how I got home. I got home, and the next day I woke up, I was in my bed by myself, and I knew that I wanted to go to AA that night. And that night I walked into it was a Monday evening. I walked into a meeting that I'd been to, and I said, I'm here for myself. But just because I walked across the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous didn't mean to say that suddenly, the light went on and I understood, and here it was, and when I first used to speak, I used to think, and I used to say, I used to say to myself when I'd finished speaking, the next time I speak, I must get my story straight. But there's no getting it straight, because I see it differently all the time. It's constantly changing. And my feelings in the first 20 years of sobriety constantly changed. And, in the very beginning, that's why we urge you, don't make any big decisions for the first year. Don't. Give yourself a break. Try 5 years. When I first came in, I had this feeling of, well, I can see that I have tendencies towards alcoholism. I'm the sort that could really develop a bad case of alcoholism, but aren't I smart that I've nipped it in the bud? That I don't really have it very badly, that I felt like I was lightly dusted with alcoholism, or gently dipped in the vat, sort of had a covering of alcoholism, but I didn't really have it intensely like you did. And I thought, on one hand, that I walked into AA and you took one look at me and you nudged each other and you said, oh, well, thank God Lorna has arrived. Now we can hold our heads up high, because she adds great tone and class to AA. And, we can come out of the obscurity of anonymity and she will lead us out there. And, I thought that you looked at me that way, but then I was terrified that you were going to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, listen, sister, exactly how much have you drunk? I mean, really? Why don't you come back when you've got a story? And by the way, we notice you always sit in the front and you eat an awful lot of cookies, and do you mind? And I was terrified you were going to kick me out, terrified. And I heard things like members. I heard that you were members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew, excuse me, I knew what being a member was all about, and I was sure that someone was going to sidle up to me, the sort that hang around in the kitchen all the time, and they're in the back of the room, and when you come in, you think they're the really smart ones, but you don't realize they're not the smart ones. But I thought they were going to come up to me, they'd probably have little praying hand cufflinks or, AA embroidered into their ties or something, and they were going to give me tests, like, what is exactly the alcoholic content of a martini? And they were going to ask me questions that an alcoholic should know. And so I was very, very confused. But then the reality, I had all these thoughts, but what actually was happening was you kept tapping me and saying, it's all right. You keep coming back. You're in the right place. And I was, you welcomed me. All my life people had said to me, no one ever said to me, something, you drink too much. Why don't you curb your drinking? People said things to me like, shh, or do you mind? Or, you thought that was amusing, but it was very spiteful. And I'd been followed by the phrase, what that girl needs is a firm hand. And I came in here, and what you gave me were the everlasting arms. And you didn't say to me, you're too much. You said to me, why don't you try becoming more of what you really are and let go of what you're not? And Alcoholics Anonymous hasn't given me a thing. It can't give us anything. I know we use that phrase all the time, and it's all right to use it. I slip into it too. But it can't give us anything. If it could give me something, it would mean that I was created incomplete in the first place. But what Alcoholics Anonymous does is it allows me to see that I can let go of what I no longer need. First of all, you said to me, you don't have to drink and drug. Well, you don't understand. I have this wedding to go to and this gallery opening, and it's different for me. And you said, yes, well, we understand it's a little difficult for you, but this is what we do in those situations. And you showed me by your example what you do and how you lived without drinking and drugging. And then it becomes more and more refined. Lorna, you don't have to react with such anger, but you don't understand the checkout girl at the supermarket is very irritating. And, my mother. Yes, we have mothers and the checkout girl and the bank clerk and all that. Yes, we understand it can be very upsetting for you, but this is what we do in those situations. And gradually, I've been able to strip down, because the most burdensome thing I have is my personality. When I start using phrases like, well, that's just the way I am, it's the big loser phrase of all time. That's the way I am, or that's the way I always do things. I've put myself in a box that's about this big. I've never been in this day sober before. The possibilities are endless. So Alcoholics Anonymous invites me not to be the way you always are and the way you always do things. So, I always say that sit in different parts of the room, see the meeting from a different angle. If there's a seat in a room and they say, oh, that's Joe's seat, surprise them. Don't sit there ever again. I had one of the greatest tools I had when I first came in, of course, was I got a sponsor. And she'd been a former nun. Makes you wonder what those women get up to behind. But anyway, she was absolutely wonderful, and she couldn't really talk to me about drinking. I couldn't grasp my drinking. I couldn't really see my drinking for about 2 years of sobriety. It took a long time for me to really understand that I drank, that I was riddled with alcoholism. I wasn't lightly dusted with it. I was riddled with it. That I didn't have one more safe sip of an alcoholic drink, snort of coke, tab of acid, or any of that. I didn't have one more bit of safety in that. that I'd come in here by just sort of clinging on by my fingernails, and you'd hauled me up the side of the ravine. But my sponsor said this one amazing thing to me, which kept me going. She said, Lorna, if you stay with us, you will be able to develop a life that will be like having a quiver of golden arrows on your back. And when you come into a situation in life that you're not too sure how to handle, you'll be able to reach back, select the perfect arrow, put it in your bow, and thwang, hit bullseye every time. And that whole idea of hitting bullseye every time, the whole idea of being appropriate in the world. You know, I'd never laughed appropriately, I never dressed appropriately, I was just wrong. And the whole idea of being appropriate in the world, especially for a woman, of dressing appropriately. You know, I was the sort that wore plunging necklines at funerals and things. You know, I just got it wrong all the time. And I knew there was something not quite right, but didn't quite know what it was. And but that I knew that with you I would be helped to be appropriate. And I wanted to be. And I was in the art business. I was around beautiful works of art all the time. It was amazing that I didn't lose that job. I think this accent just helped me an awful lot. But I realized when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that my life could be a work of art. I could develop a life that was being a work of art. And, you know, I'm very cognizant of the time. I've had 31 years I've been given 31 years of a sober life. And of course, in 31 years, so much has happened. When I was 15 years sober, I went through the worst hell I've ever known in my life. Hell, hell, hell. And I was screaming. I think anyone that gets through their teens in sobriety, oh, it's a miracle. And, you know, I'd be the big book went out the window. Sponsees became my sponsors. Just everything went, and the only thing God left me with was smart feet. And my feet brought me to meetings, and I screamed and I cried and I carried on. And that dark night lasted about 4 years. And there were people in the room saying, "How long does she have? 17 years? Well, I certainly don't want what she's got, you know." And but one thing I've never been wary of, I've never been ashamed of where I am at in my sobriety. I've never said, "Oh, I've got 22 years. I shouldn't be feeling this way." It's for anyone in the room with time, I just want to say this, that it's very, you know, what happens. I was also told, I know I'll probably get a bullet between the eyes for this, that don't work the program. Inherent in all work is an aspect of boredom. And I was taught to fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, have a love affair with it. You need that deep passion to get you through the long, dry spells. And I've not always loved being sober. I don't wake up every morning joyful about being sober and, oh, what a lovely opportunity to make amends and to get things right and do all that and to love my fellow man and all that stuff. No, I don't. And but I've always been in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And somewhere in my teens, it switched from me, my, mine, to our common welfare. And I know that if I keep my eye on AA, I'm included in that. I'm included in that passion. I'm part of that. So I think very often what happens with people that have long-term is, and they've really worked and they've done the steps and they've got the sponsees and they've had the baseball games and they've done all that stuff, and they say, look, I'm 14, 17 years sober and I feel like shit. And this relationship isn't working out. I've just lost a job or my best friend or whatever. And then it starts going, I've done all this work in AA, and I feel like this. Therefore, I haven't done it right. You know, I haven't done it right because I'm probably not meant to be there, and I'm probably not an alcoholic. And so the drifting starts. It's very imperceptible. But then you hear, oh, you know, Harry had 18 years and he picked up. No, yes. I'm amazed that Harry didn't pick up long before. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I just think, I was told that the basis of spiritual life is never ever to judge where I am on the spiritual path, to never judge my spiritual process or my spiritual life or anything. But I just want to give those words to anyone in the room that has some time, that's feeling, God Almighty, why do I feel like this? And, you know, they say that the only step we can do perfectly is the first step. I don't believe that at all. If I could do the first step perfectly, I wouldn't need the other steps. I can't do any of it perfectly. I'm constantly having to admit that I'm powerless, that my life is unmanageable. My life is of course more manageable than it was back in 1976. Of course it is. And there's wonderful things in my life. But then there are things that are not so great. And I would like to tell this story, two stories to end with. This one is a pretty long one, just to give you some hope. In May of this year, I've had a very intense, you get those that come into the program and they've eaten nothing but Twinkies and haven't seen a vegetable in years, and suddenly they're running the marathon. And then you get those that haven't read anything in years, and they're, 5 minutes later they're counselors and doing their degrees. And then you get those that come in and they couldn't care less about God, and the next thing they're in India. And that was me. I was the India sort, and a lot of you know I was very friendly with Mother Teresa, but that's another whole story. But anyway, I was going off on retreat in May. I was motoring up from New York to Massachusetts, and I was to sit a 3-week silent retreat, and there was this Sayadaw that was here from Burma, and a very intense thing at the forest refuge. I'd been there many times before. It's a very intense, you've got to be really serious, 16 hours of meditation a day, no eating afternoon, all that sort of thing. And I love it. I was motoring up, get to Hartford, I'm involved in this huge car accident, 5-car pileup. And it's probably what jerked my cancer into bloom. But anyway, the airbag deployed into my chest, and it was one of those wrecks. It was raining. It was one of those wrecks you see on the highway that you go, oh no, and it was traffic was backed up for 20 miles. The 5 of us were involved in this accident. 5 cars were totaled, and every single driver walked out of their cars alive. It was a miracle. But it was there was glass all over the place, and cars turned around this way. There were ambulances and fire engines and tow trucks, and just a mess on the highway. And it really shook me up. But there was one light spot in it. This huge state trooper rolls up, and he's in his yellow slicker with his Smokey the Bear hat, and he walks up to this wreck on the highway, and he goes, all right, he said, how many times have I told you can't park here? So anyway, the insurance kicked in, and I got another car, and I drove the 70-odd miles up to retreat. The retreat had already started, it had already started a few days by the time I get there. I enter this retreat, and all the yogis are sitting on their cushions and meditating and very quiet. I'm like a lunatic. Do you know, I've just come in from this pile-up. My teachers insist that I go, you know, and it's my idea of what my life should be. My idea. This is my spiritual life. This is my journey. This is what I've decided it's going to be. I was 31 years in August. I was 30 years sober just before my 31st anniversary. I'm here to do this 3-week retreat. I'm going to get from this Sayadaw. I'm going to get, you know, the essence of life. And my teachers insist that I go and get some acupuncture in the nearby town. So I take the rental car and I go. And when you're on retreat, you're supposed to stay on retreat. You're not supposed to be motoring off. But anyway, they told me to go. So I went off, and I'm in this tiny little town called Petersham. It's got a little clapboard church and a village green and a general store. So I get the acupuncture, I come out, I get into the car, and the village green is about where that back wall is from where I am now. My car is parked like this, and there's a car parked alongside the village green. And very mindfully, very carefully, very meditatively, I backed right into that car. And I heard it go boom. And I saw some people walking into the general store, and they saw me. And I got out, took a cursory look at this car, and as soon as they went into the store, I got back in that car and I fled. I fled. I am racing down the country roads, screeching, didn't even put my seatbelt on. I'd been almost lost my life 5 days before in this huge accident. I'm pull into the retreat center, which is about 3 miles away, panting like this. And the fear in me, the fear. I'm 30 years sober and I'm a hit and runner. And, you know, all my spiritual life, all my being honest, all my steps, this is what God wants from me, all that, I fled. If that had been a child, would I have done the same thing? The fear in my body was so immense. I can assure you, I have never, ever felt fear like that. I don't know whether it kicked up that first accident or what happened, but there I am. Then I walk into the retreat, they're all meditating and eating mindfully, and I'm thinking, that's what I wanted. I came for that. Why am I having accidents? Why am I like this? Anyway, I sat down on the cushion, and the following day, I came to my senses. I'm sitting in the meditation hall, and I thought, what am I doing? This is my sobriety. What am I doing? I get back in the car. I go back to Petersham. I think, well, I'm out now. I'm out from the retreat. I'll go to the post office and I'll get some stamps. Why I needed stamps, I don't know. But anyway, I go into the post office. As I'm coming out of this, it's just a nothing one-horse town. It's not even one horse in this town. There's a young policeman coming out. And I said, oh, excuse me, officer. I said, yesterday I was in the general store, and when I came out, I backed my car into another car. But I didn't think I'd done anything because there's nothing really the matter with my car. But when I looked, there was a tiniest little chip on my car this morning, so I thought I'd better come and see if the other car was damaged. He said, do you have Jersey license plates? I said, yes, because this was a rent-a-car. And he said, we have a warrant out on you. And I just tell this, it all got sorted out, but I just tell this story. Here I am, 30 years sober. I'm a hit and runner. I have a warrant out, a bulletin out, they called it, a bulletin out on me. I've made this decision that this is going to be my spiritual life. This is what I'm going for. And it turns out to be totally, completely different. So, I never know what's in store. And it actually was, I was due for a mammogram when I came back from retreat, and I went for the mammogram, and they found some things, and then they did some biopsies, and I was told that it was malignant, and I had this breast cancer, and I had this double mastectomy this summer. And I want to say to you that this wasn't in my plan either. Wasn't in my plan to have my breasts removed and my hair fall out, and to have to sell my jewelry to meet expenses and things. But and to have my car gone. It's been a year of having everything stripped from me. But you know something? I was in a meeting, a very early morning meeting on a Sunday in the Hamptons, about 3 weeks after surgery. And this is the power of being sober. The thought came to me, you know, if I hadn't had cancer this summer, my summer would have droned on in the same old way. It really informed and woke me up. And the thing it did, the major thing it did, was allow me to accept other people's generosity towards me. To not say, no, it's all right, I can manage. To allow others to help me. It has been the most trying and difficult and joyous thing. I mean, I can't live my life without you. I cannot. And this in particular was very poignant for me. And I've absolutely needed the help of my friends and my people and my AA community. And in closing, I want to say, because I think it's very inspirational for us to hear what we think of her or what we don't think of her, neither here nor there, but you know, I was very close with Mother Teresa, and I was actually called as a witness for her canonization. We often had talks about alcoholism. She was fascinated with the fact that I was sober. And I often used to tease her, "Are you sure you don't have a problem, Mother? You're awfully interested in all this." But the reason she was so fascinated was that Mother Teresa had success with every form of suffering human. But she could not help the alcoholic, because she didn't have what you and I have. She did not have the words of eternal life. And those words are, "I know how you feel. Let me tell you what happened to me." So no one is saved after 60 minutes, I don't believe. So I want to thank you so much once again for inviting me here. I want to thank you for going to meetings, for doing service, for putting money in the basket. Never, ever, ever let the basket pass without contributing. If you don't have money, throw your watch in, write a poem, cut a lock off your hair if you have any, but don't let it ever pass by. It's a signal of not letting life pass by without contributing to it in some way. So thank you for all that you do, because if you weren't here, I truly doubt that I would have died very quickly, but my life would have become just a continuation of the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So thank you for your sobriety. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.